My name is Nora Jennings, and I turned 30 on a Tuesday. That Saturday night, the people who raised me took me to dinner at a restaurant I had never been invited to before. My mother wore pearls. My father wore the navy suit he saved for bank meetings. My sister Ashley wore the smile she used when she already knew she was getting something. There was no cake, no candle, no card, just a corner table at a place called the Lark and Finch, 3 glasses of untouched wine, and a cream-colored envelope sitting beside my mother's plate like a loaded weapon. Halfway through dinner, my mother reached across the table, touched my hand, and said, "Nora, you deserve to know the truth now." My father looked down at his steak. Ashley leaned back and folded her arms. Then my mother said the sentence she had been rehearsing for 30 years. "We never actually adopted you." She waited for me to collapse. I did not. She kept going. "We were your legal guardians. Your mother's settlement paid us to raise you. It paid for the house, the bills, the extras. But that arrangement ended when you turned 30. So there's no reason to keep pretending this is the same family anymore." Then she slid the envelope across the table. Inside was a legal release, a final guardianship acknowledgement, and a statement saying I had no claim against them, no right to ask for records, no right to challenge how my childhood funds had been spent, and no place in their estate going forward. Ashley smiled and said, "Honestly, Nora, this is best for everyone. Real family should come first." For almost 1 full minute, I said nothing. Not because I was shocked, because I was listening to the chair scrape 3 tables behind my mother. What none of them knew was that 6 months earlier, I had found the probate file they had hidden from me my entire life. I knew about the settlement. I knew about the monthly payments. I knew about the trust. I knew that on my 30th birthday, the remaining balance passed to me, not to them. And I knew that the woman they told me had abandoned me had actually died saving my life. But most important of all, I knew I had family. They were sitting at table 14, directly behind my mother's chair. They had been there the whole time, waiting for me to stop needing permission to turn around. To understand why I did not cry when my mother told me I had never really been hers. You need to understand that she had been telling me that in smaller ways, my entire life. Not with words. With math. I grew up in a brick house in Greenville, South Carolina, with white shutters, trimmed hedges, and a front porch my mother decorated every fall with pumpkins she did not let me touch. My parents were Charles and Karen Jennings. At least, that was what I called them. Charles sold commercial insurance. Karen ran a small interior design business out of the dining room and spent most of my childhood telling people she had stepped away from bigger opportunities to raise us properly. Us meant Ashley and me. But even when I was little, I understood that there were 2 different meanings of daughter in that house. Ashley was their miracle. That was the word Karen used. She was born after years of fertility treatments, after prayers, after doctors, after my mother had apparently decided motherhood was something the world owed her. Ashley was blonde, blue-eyed, musical, fragile when it helped her, and dramatic when fragile was not enough. I was practical. That was my assigned word. Nora is practical. Nora understands. Nora doesn't mind. I heard it when Ashley got the bedroom with the bay window because she needed natural light for piano practice. I heard it when Ashley got a new dress for every school dance, and I was told my black church dress could be made age-appropriate with a cardigan. I heard it when Ashley cried over not making cheer, captain, and my mother canceled my debate tournament ride because your sister needs us today. I heard it so often that for years I thought practical meant good. It did not. It meant inexpensive. My birthdays were always small because March was a busy month for Karen's design clients and Ashley's spring recitals. When I turned 9, there was a cupcake in a plastic grocery container with a single candle pushed too close to the edge. Karen lit it while still on the phone with a client. Charles stood in the doorway, checking emails. Ashley asked if she could have the frosting flower. I said yes. Practical girls say yes quickly because a room stays warmer when they do. 3 weeks later, Ashley turned 7. There was a rented pony, a balloon arch, 2 cakes, and a photographer. I remember standing in the kitchen, helping Karen tie ribbon around party favor bags. When I asked if my next birthday could have balloons, she did not even look up. Nora, sweetheart, not everything has to be equal to be fair. I was 9. I believed her. Children believe the people who feed them, even when those people are feeding them less. The only person in that family who made me feel fully visible was Charles's older sister, Aunt Lillian. She was not soft. She did not bake cookies or keep candy in her purse. She smoked on her back patio even after everyone begged her to quit, wore red lipstick to the grocery store, and once told a church lady that gossip in a nicer blouse was still gossip. But she had a way of looking at me like I had entered the room completely. Not as help. Not as a burden. Not as Ashley's extra shadow. As Nora. Every Sunday afternoon when I was younger, she drove over in her old green Volvo and took me to lunch after church. Karen called it Lillian's little rescue mission in a voice that meant it was not a compliment. Aunt Lillian did not care. She took me to diners and bookstores and quiet parks where she let me talk without finishing my sentences for me. When I was 12, after Ashley told me during an argument that I was basically borrowed, I ran to Aunt Lillian's car and cried so hard I could not breathe. She let me cry. Then she handed me a napkin and said, "Listen to me, Nora Jennings. Some people think blood makes a family. Some people think paperwork does. They are both wrong if love is missing." I asked her what made a family. She tapped ash into the little tray in her car and said, "Who tells the truth when lying would be cheaper?" I did not understand then. Aunt Lillian died when I was 26, 4 years before the dinner at the Lark and Finch. Lung cancer, fast and ugly and unfair in the way diseases are when they take the only person brave enough to say what everyone else hides. At her memorial, Ashley cried loudly, though she had visited Lillian twice in 5 years. Karen gave a speech about family bonds. Charles stood stiffly beside her and avoided my eyes. Afterward, a bank representative I did not know shook Charles's hand. They spoke in low voices near the funeral home coffee urn. When I approached, the conversation stopped. I remember that. Not because I understood it, because I had trained myself to notice when adults changed tone around me. That skill would later save everything. By 30, I was not living anything like the life Karen had predicted for me. She had always said I would be steady in her mouth. Steady meant small. But I had built a career in municipal records compliance. It sounds boring until you understand that almost everything important in a city eventually passes through a file. Deeds, permits, tax liens, guardianship notices, property transfers, probate filings, court orders, archived letters from people who thought nobody would ever read them again. I worked in the county records department first, then moved into a legal compliance role for a public trust administration office. I was good at it because I had spent my childhood reading rooms. Documents were easier. Documents do not smile while they lie. They simply say what happened, or they reveal who wanted the official version to look clean. At work, I could find a missing clause in 10 minutes. At home, I could not find the courage to ask why no one in my family had ever shown me a baby picture before age 2. That is the strange thing about being raised inside a story. You learn every line of it. You decorate the walls of it. You defend it to strangers. Even when the foundation shifts under your feet, you tell yourself old houses settle. The first real crack appeared 6 months before my 30th birthday. I was processing archived guardianship closures for a digitization project. It was the kind of work most people hate. Old scanned files, mismatched indexes, handwritten docket numbers, faded stamps from courts that had changed software 3 times since the original filing. I loved it. There is something peaceful about a file that has waited 20 years to be understood. That afternoon, a name appeared on a docket list that made my fingers stop over the keyboard. Jennings, Nora May. My middle name? May? I had never liked it. Karen once told me it was already attached to you when we got you, and then laughed like that explained enough. The file was restricted, but not sealed. Adult ward, guardianship support, settlement trust, age of distribution, 30. My mouth went dry. I should have stopped. Professionally, I should have requested a supervisor, recused myself, and pretended my hands were not shaking. Personally, I had spent 30 years being managed by people who trusted my silence more than my rights. So I pulled the file. The first page was a petition for guardianship filed when I was 19 months old. Charles and Karen Jennings, maternal relatives by marriage, seeking legal guardianship of minor child Nora May Byrne following the death of biological mother Elise Byrne. Biological mother? Elise Byrne. The room moved around me without moving. I read the line again. Following the death. Not abandonment. Not, your birth mother couldn't keep you. The vague sentence Karen had once thrown at me when I was 16 and asking too many questions. Death. I kept reading. There had been an accident at a textile plant outside Spartanburg. A chemical fire. My mother, Elise, worked in the office but ran back into the building when she realized the daycare room had not been fully evacuated. I was in that daycare room. 19 months old. She got me out. She did not get herself out. There was a wrongful death settlement. There was a minor's trust. There were monthly guardian distributions to Charles and Karen for housing, care, education, and reasonable child expenses. There was a provision that the support payments would continue until I turned 30. At which point the remaining principal would distribute to me outright, subject to a final accounting and audit. I sat at my desk staring at the screen while every birthday, every hand-me-down, every Nora understands rearranged itself into a shape so ugly I could barely look at it. They had been paid to raise me, and somehow I had still learned to ask for less. The file also contained correspondence, letters from someone named May Byrne. My grandmother, my real grandmother, requesting visitation, requesting updates, requesting school photos, requesting the address where birthday gifts could be sent. Each letter had a response from Karen's attorney. The child is adjusting. Contact would not be in Nora's best interest. Please respect the guardian's decision. Further communication should be directed through counsel. The last letter was handwritten. The scan was crooked. Dear Karen and Charles, I am not trying to take her from you. I just want her to know that her mother loved her and that there is a place at our table if she ever wants it. Please. May Byrne. There was no response in the file. I printed that letter. Then I went to the bathroom at work, locked the stall, and cried without making a sound. That evening, I called the number listed on the most recent correspondence. It was disconnected. So I searched, not illegally, not dramatically, just the way records people search, patiently through property records, old directories, obituaries, voter registration, business licenses, marriage indexes, and a church newsletter from 2018. May Byrne was alive, 78 years old, living in a small town 40 miles away. She had a daughter, my Aunt Clara, and a grandson named Ben, who would be 23 now. The next day, I mailed a letter. I wrote it 6 times before I could send it. Dear Mrs. Byrne, my name is Nora Mae Jennings. I believe my birth mother was Elise Byrne. I recently found court records suggesting you tried to contact me when I was a child. If this letter reaches you and you are willing, I would like to speak with you. No pressure, no expectations. Nora. She called 3 days later. I was in the grocery store aisle holding a bag of rice when my phone rang. A woman's voice said, Nora? One word. And I knew. I sat down on the bottom shelf between the rice and dried beans because my knees forgot their job. Yes. There was a sound on the other end like a hand covering a mouth. Then she said, Oh, honey, I have waited 28 years to hear you breathe. No one in my childhood had ever said anything like that to me. Not once. I met May Byrne at a diner halfway between Greenville and her town on a rainy Saturday morning. She was small, white-haired, and wore a blue sweater buttoned wrong at the collar because she had been too nervous to dress carefully. Aunt Clara came with her, a tall woman with strong hands and my mother's eyes. Ben came too, though he pretended he was only there to drive them and spent the first 10 minutes looking at the menu like it contained instructions for meeting a lost cousin. May had brought a photo album. It sat beside her coffee unopened for almost half an hour. I didn't want to overwhelm you, she said. I almost laughed because everything was already overwhelming. Her face, her voice, the way she kept looking at me like she was checking whether I would vanish if she blinked too hard. Can I see her? I asked. May opened the album. There was Elise Byrne at 19, standing beside a lake with wet hair and a grin too big for the camera. Elise at 22 in a diner uniform. Elise holding me as a baby, forehead pressed to mine, eyes closed. I touched the edge of the photo. No one had ever shown me that before. Karen had once told me there were no baby pictures because everything was complicated back then. Complicated. Another clean word for a dirty choice. May slid a second picture toward me. It was of a kitchen table set for Christmas, one extra high chair at the corner. We kept it there for 3 years, she said. Your grandfathers said maybe one day they'd come to their senses and let us see you. I looked up. You kept a chair? Aunt Clara nodded. For every holiday. Then after a while, Mom said putting it away felt like giving up. So it stayed. Something in my chest opened and hurt at the same time. I had spent my life trying to earn a place in a house that had priced me by the month, while 40 miles away, a family had been setting a chair for a child they were not allowed to know. I did not know how to hold both truths. So May reached across the table and held my hand until I did not have to. Over the next 6 months, I learned a new language. Not legal, not emotional manipulation. Welcome. May called every Sunday at 4, the same hour Aunt Lillian used to visit. She asked how my week was and did not turn my answer into a request. Clara sent me recipes Elise had liked and apologized too much for things she had not done. Ben texted me a terrible joke every Friday morning and then asked if that was too sibling adjacent after the third one. I did not know what to do with them. So I tested them, which is not something I am proud of, but is something I understand. I canceled one dinner because work ran late. May said, "Next week, honey," and meant it. I forgot to reply to Clara for 4 days. She sent, "No rush. I'm here when you are." I tried to pay for everyone's lunch twice. Ben finally took the check from my hand and said, "You're not a subscription service, Nora." I cried in my car after that, because being wanted when you have only been useful feels suspicious at first. Then slowly, it feels like water. During those same months, I hired an attorney. Her name was Mara Ellison, a trust litigation lawyer with sharp glasses, sharper questions, and no patience for sentimental fraud. She reviewed the file. Then she reviewed the annual accountings Charles and Karen had filed over the years. Some expenses were legitimate. Food, school supplies, medical premiums, a portion of household costs. Others were not. Ashley's piano lessons charged under child enrichment. A bathroom renovation charged under minor housing adjustment. A family cruise listed as therapeutic travel. A down payment on Ashley's car hidden under transportation support. A tuition payment to Ashley's private high school partly allocated to my education expenses for a year when I attended public school. Mara took off her glasses after reading that one. "Nora," she said, "your guardians have a problem." "How big?" "Big enough that they need you to sign a release before the final accounting is reviewed." I thought about Karen's sudden birthday invitation. It had not arrived yet, but after that meeting, I understood it would. Money has a schedule. People who live off it usually feel the deadline before they admit it. Mara prepared 3 documents for me to keep in a folder. Her representation letter. The trust distribution provision showing the payments ended at 30, and the remainder passed to me. A preliminary accounting review listing questionable charges. I added 3 documents of my own. May's handwritten letter from the court file. My original birth certificate with Elise Byrne listed as my mother. And the photo of the empty Christmas high chair at May's table. Not because a judge needed it. Because I did. The call came 2 weeks before my birthday. Karen's voice was honeyed. "Nora, sweetheart, your father and I would love to take you to dinner for your 30th. Somewhere nice. We never really celebrated you properly." I closed my eyes. There it was. Properly. 30 years late, 2 weeks before an audit. I said yes. Then I hung up and called May. "I think they're going to ask me to sign something," May was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Do you want us nearby?" I did. I hated that I did. I was 30 years old. I worked with court records and trusts and final accountings. I had an attorney. I had facts. I had paper. But some wounds are not legal. Some wounds are 9-year-old girls looking at one candle and pretending it is enough. Yes, I said. I don't want to hear it alone. May did not hesitate. Tell me when and where. So I made a second reservation at the Lark and Finch. Party of 3. Table 14. 3 tables behind my mother's chair. I told May, Clara, and Ben to arrive 10 minutes after us, order whatever they wanted, and stay quiet unless I came to them. May said, "We can do quiet." Ben said in the background, "I cannot promise that if someone insults her—" I smiled for the first time that day. That was the difference. Karen had spent my life telling me not to make a scene. My birth family was prepared to hold themselves back because I asked them to let me make my own. The night of the dinner, I arrived early. I always arrive early when I am afraid. The Lark and Finch was all brass lamps, dark green walls, white plates, and servers who moved like they had been trained to appear only when needed. Karen loved restaurants like that because they made cruelty feel expensive enough to be respectable. The hostess looked up. "Jennings, party of 4?" I almost laughed. 4. They had included Ashley. Of course they had. Ashley was already at the table when I arrived, scrolling her phone beside my father. She looked up and gave me a little wave, the kind you give someone from high school you hope does not sit near you. My mother stood. "Nora, happy birthday." She kissed my cheek. Her perfume was the same as always, white flowers and warning. Charles hugged me awkwardly. 30, big year. Ashley said, "You look tired." I sat down. "So do you." Her eyes narrowed. Karen's smile flickered. Good. I was not here as the easy one anymore. We ordered drinks. Karen chose wine. Charles ordered bourbon. Ashley ordered a cocktail that came with smoke under a glass dome. I ordered sparkling water. Karen laughed softly. Still so modest. "No," I said, "just thirsty." The first half hour was performance. Karen asked about my work and did not listen to the answer. Charles asked whether I was dating anyone, then looked relieved when I said no. Ashley talked about her new real estate certification and how expensive staging furniture had become. She said, "You wouldn't believe what people expect you to invest before you even close your first big sale." I looked at her. I might. She did not catch the tone. Karen did. Her hand tightened around the stem of her wine glass. The envelope sat beside her plate the entire time. Cream-colored. Heavy. Waiting. At 7:42, May, Clara, and Ben entered. I saw them in the mirror behind the bar. May wore a navy dress and the pearl earrings she said Elise had loved. Clara wore a black blazer. Ben wore a tie badly enough that Clara fixed it before they reached the table. The hostess led them to table 14, behind Karen. Slightly left. Exactly where I had requested. May did not look at me right away. That was the plan. But Ben did. One quick glance. One small nod. I breathed for the first time in 15 minutes. Karen followed my eyes, but by then Ben was looking at the menu. "Do you know them?" she asked. "No," I said. It was not exactly a lie. Not in the language Karen had taught me. We ate very little. The food came and went. Salmon for Karen, steak for Charles, pasta for Ashley. I ordered soup and let it cool. Finally, Karen folded her hands. There are sounds you recognize after a lifetime in a house. The change in breath before bad news. The softening of voice before a knife. Nora, she said, there is something we should have told you a long time ago. Charles stared at his plate. Ashley sat back. I placed one hand on the blue folder in my lap. Karen continued, You were not adopted. The restaurant noise seemed to dim. Not because I did not know. Because hearing a lie become a weapon still has weight. Karen watched my face. We were appointed your guardians when you were very young. Your biological mother died, and there was no one appropriate to take you. We stepped in. No one appropriate. 40 miles away, May Byrne had kept a chair beside her kitchen table. I said nothing. Karen leaned forward. We did the best we could, but now you're 30. The arrangement is over. The payments are over. And frankly, Nora, your father and I are tired. Charles flinched at tired. Ashley did not. Karen's voice became gentler, which meant worse. We have carried you for 3 decades. There it was. Carried, not loved. We raised you, fed you, gave you a home, treated you like one of ours. Like, the smallest words tell the truth when people are too careful with the big ones. And now, she said, it's time to formalize reality. She slid the envelope across the table. The edge touched my water glass. I did not open it immediately. Karen frowned. Aren't you going to look? In a minute. Ashley let out a small laugh. Nora, don't make this dramatic. I looked at her. You came to my birthday dinner to watch our parents legally remove me from the family. I think dramatic arrived before I did. Her face changed. Charles whispered, Nora. I opened the envelope. The first page was a release. The second page was a final family acknowledgement. The third page was a waiver of accounting rights. I read fast, not skimming, reading. They had hired someone competent enough to dress the blade properly. The waiver stated that I acknowledged receiving full and adequate support during my minority and adulthood, released Charles and Karen from any past financial claims related to guardianship, support, care funds, housing distributions, educational allocations, and trust-related disbursements, and agreed not to contest any accounting filed by them or on their behalf. It was not a goodbye. It was a cover-up. I set the page down. Karen smiled. It's mostly standard language. It always is. That made Charles look up. He knew that voice. It was not the daughter voice. It was the records office voice. The one I used when a document was about to confess. Ashley rolled her eyes. Just sign it. You're not losing anything. You were never getting anything anyway. Karen said, Ashley, but softly. Not because Ashley was wrong. Because she had spoken too soon. Charles cleared his throat. We also updated our estate plan. You won't be included. We wanted to tell you in person so there would be no confusion later. I looked at him. What estate plan? Our will. What about the Byrne Minor Settlement Trust? The table stopped breathing. Karen's lips parted. Charles went gray. Ashley looked between them. What trust? I turned my water glass once on the tablecloth. What exactly did you file, Dad? Your will? Your guardianship closure? Or the final accounting on the trust? His mouth opened, closed. Behind Karen, at table 14, I saw Clara slowly put down her fork. Karen recovered first. I don't know what you think you found. I smiled then. Not happily. Precisely. I found the file. There is a silence that follows those 4 words when the wrong people hear them. I found the file. It is not loud. It does not need to be. It enters the room and locks the door. Charles looked at Karen. Karen looked at the envelope. Ashley said, "What file?" I lifted the blue folder from my lap and placed it on the table. Karen stared at it. She had glanced at it all night and assumed it was paperwork from my job. Something boring, something harmless. She forgot that boring paperwork is where expensive truths go to survive. I opened it. The first page was Mara Ellison's representation letter. "I have counsel," I said. Charles closed his eyes. Karen whispered, "For what?" "For the final accounting." I placed the second page down. The trust terms, monthly guardian distributions to Charles and Karen Jennings for care and housing, payable until Nora Mae Byrne reaches age 30. Upon her 30th birthday, remaining principal distributes to Nora Mae Byrne, subject to final accounting review. Ashley leaned over to read. Her mouth fell open. "Byrne?" I placed the third page down. "My original birth certificate. Elise Byrne, my mother." Karen said, "We were going to tell you." "When? After I signed?" No answer. I placed the fourth page down. "A preliminary review of questionable expenses charged to my support account." Charles's hand moved toward the paper, then stopped. He had always been better at silence than courage. Karen's voice sharpened. "You have no idea what it costs to raise you." "I have itemized reports." "That is not the same thing." "No, the reports are more honest." Ashley snapped. "This is disgusting. They gave you a home." "The trust helped pay for that home." "You ate our food." "The trust helped pay for food." "You think everything is about money?" I looked at her. "No, Ashley, that was your family's mistake, not mine." Karen stood halfway. "Your family?" The word cracked. "Good." There was the truth. I turned the final page toward her. Mae Byrne's letter. The one from the court file? "Please let her know her mother loved her, and that there is a place at our table if she ever wants it." Karen did not touch it. She did not need to. She recognized it. That was when I understood she had read it before. Maybe not once. Maybe many times. Maybe she had kept it from me, not because a lawyer advised her to, but because a grandmother who wanted nothing but a visit had threatened the story Karen needed me to live inside. "You knew they wanted me," I said. Karen's face changed. For 1 second, the mask slipped. Not guilt. Annoyance? As if I had found an old receipt she meant to throw away. Those people were unstable. Behind her, Mae went perfectly still. My voice did not rise. "Those people are my family." Karen laughed. A short, ugly laugh. "We are your family." "No," I said. "You were my guardians." The legal accuracy of it hit harder than shouting. Charles put a hand over his face. Ashley looked furious. but also confused in the way people look when a structure they benefited from is explained for the first time. Karen reached across the table. Nora, listen to me. Whatever these papers say, we raised you. We were there. We are your parents. That was the first time that night she used parents like a plea instead of a title. I looked at her hand. I did not take it. You just told me I was an arrangement. I was upset. You told me the payments ended. I was explaining. You asked me to release you from accounting. That is normal. No, I said, that is fear. Her face hardened. There she was. The real Karen Jennings. Not the mother. Not the hostess. The woman whose numbers had stopped working. You ungrateful little girl, she said. A waiter near the wall froze. Ashley whispered, Mom. But Karen had lost the script. We took you in. We could have said no. Do you know where you would have ended up? Do you know what kind of life you would have had without us? Behind her, May stood. Not fast. Not dramatically. Like a queen rising from a chair she had occupied with restraint for as long as dignity allowed. Clara stood beside her. Ben stood too quickly, bumping the table with his knee. Karen noticed the movement behind her. I saw the question cross her face before she turned. Before you finish, I said, you should know something. Karen kept her eyes on me. What? My birth family is sitting 3 tables behind you. The sentence moved through the air like a match in a dark room. Ashley turned first. Then Charles. Then Karen. Slowly, as if part of her already knew. At table 14, May Burns stood in her navy dress with both hands folded over the back of a chair. Clara stood tall beside her, eyes shining. Ben looked like he was one insult away from becoming a problem. For several seconds, no one spoke. May did not look at Karen first. She looked at me, and the whole of her face softened. That was what broke me. Not Karen's cruelty. Not the papers. Not the money. The softness. Then May looked at Karen. I wrote to you for years, she said. Her voice was quiet. Everyone nearby heard it anyway. Karen swallowed. You had no right to interfere. I was her grandmother. You were a stranger to her. No, May said. You made me one. That sentence landed in the restaurant with more force than any shouting could have. Charles stood abruptly, then sat back down like his knees had forgotten which direction courage lived. Ashley looked from May to me. You set this up? I looked at her. No, I found what was hidden and invited the people it hurt. Karen's face was pale now. The woman who had planned to reduce me to a line item in public had suddenly become visible to witnesses she had not approved. That was her worst nightmare. Not that she had hurt me, that people could see it. She turned back to me. Nora, sit down. We can talk about this at home. I almost smiled. Home. The word she had not used until the room began turning against her. I am home, I said. Then I stood. A chair is not just furniture when you have spent your life earning one. May had asked the restaurant to set a 4th chair at table 14. I had not known that. Their reservation was for 3. I told them to come as 3. I told them I would join them only if I could. But there it was. An empty chair between May and Clara. A place setting. A folded napkin. a water glass waiting. I stared at it for 1 second too long. May saw. "We saved you a seat," she said. "There are sentences that do not enter your ears. They enter the oldest part of you. The 9-year-old with the cupcake. The 12-year-old being told she was borrowed. The 16-year-old asking why there were no baby pictures. The 30-year-old reading her mother's death in a courthouse file. All of them heard it. We saved you a seat." I walked away from the Jennings table. Karen said my name. Then Charles. Then Ashley. I did not turn. Not because I was strong, because if I turned, I might have seen something that made me hesitate. And I had hesitated for 30 years. At table 14, Ben pulled out the chair. Clara touched my shoulder. May took both my hands. "You look like Elise when you are trying not to cry," she said. I cried then. Quietly. Finally. Not for Karen. Not for Charles. Not for the family I was losing. For the mother who had died running into fire. For the grandmother who had written letters into silence. For the aunt who had kept recipes and photos. For the cousin who wore a crooked tie because he wanted to show up properly. For myself. A waiter brought dessert to table 14. Chocolate cake. May had ordered it before I sat down. 1 slice. 1 candle. For a second, I almost laughed at the cruelty of symmetry. 1 candle had been all I got for years. But this one was different. This one was not because I was worth less. This one was because they were starting where the old story began and changing what it meant. Ben lit it. Clara whispered, "Make a wish." I closed my eyes and realized I did not need to. At the other table, Karen was crying now. Not the soft, broken kind. The angry kind. The kind that needs an audience to become useful. After everything we did for you, her voice carried, "After 30 years, you humiliate us like this." The restaurant quieted. Charles murmured, "Karen, stop." She did not. "We gave you a roof. We gave you food. We gave you our name." May's hand closed around mine under the table. I turned slightly, just enough to speak without standing. The trust gave me the roof. The trust helped pay for the food. And the name was never mine. You just let me borrow it until it stopped paying. A few people at nearby tables looked away. Not from me. From her. Karen's mouth opened. Nothing came out. For the first time in my life, I watched my mother search for a line and find no script. So I gave her one. I walked back to the Jennings table one final time. I took May's old letter and placed a copy beside Karen's unsigned release. "You can keep this," I said. "It explains what family sounds like when no money is attached." Then I looked at Charles. For a moment, I saw something in him that might have been regret. Real regret? Late. Weak. Still real. He whispered, "Nora, I'm sorry." I nodded once. Not forgiveness. Acknowledgement. "Tell that to the accounting reviewer," I said. Then I returned to table 14 and did not look back again. Not when Karen called my name. Not when Ashley said I was being cruel. Not when Charles said nothing at all, which was what he had done best for 30 years. I sat with May, Clara, and Ben. I blew out the candle, and for the first time, the smoke did not smell like something ending. It smelled like room being made. The trust did what documents do when people have tried and failed to make them emotional. It followed its terms. On my 30th birthday, the guardian distributions to Charles and Karen Jennings ended automatically. The remaining principal of the Byrne Minor Settlement Trust transferred to me under corporate oversight, subject to the final accounting. Mara filed a formal objection to several categories of expenses. Not all. I did not need revenge badly enough to lie. Some money had been spent properly, some had not. The questionable charges totaled more than $240,000 over 28 years. Ashley's tuition assistance, Ashley's car down payment, renovations that improved the Jennings home far beyond any proportional housing cost, travel, furniture, design expenses routed through Karen's business. The audit took 14 months. Charles settled. Karen fought longer because fighting let her believe she was still the injured party. In the end, they agreed to a repayment plan secured against the house with white shutters, the house where my room had been cold first, the house the trust had helped support while May's letters went unanswered. I did not move into it. I did not want it. That surprised people. Maybe it surprised me too. For a while, I thought justice would look like taking back every room where I had felt small. But some rooms are not worth reclaiming. Some rooms become powerful only after you stop entering them. Charles texted once a few months after the dinner. I should have told you sooner. I stared at the message for a long time. Sooner. A word that tried to compress 30 years into a scheduling error. I replied with one sentence. You should have told the truth when it cost you something. He did not answer. Ashley sent 3 messages. The first accused me of ruining the family. The second asked whether the audit would affect her credit. The third, weeks later, asked if I could at least understand that she had not known where the money came from. That one I answered. You knew I was treated differently. You didn't need a file to see that. She did not reply. Karen sent nothing directly. But she told relatives I had been manipulated by those Byrne people. Those Byrne people sent birthday cards, soup when I had the flu, a spare key to May's house, and a photo of Elise taped to the inside of a kitchen cabinet so I could find my mother looking back at me while reaching for coffee mugs. So I let Karen have her version. People who need lies to survive usually decorate them heavily. Truth does not require that much furniture. A year after the dinner, I spent my 31st birthday at May's house. There were 12 people there. Clara made lasagna. Ben made a playlist that was half terrible on purpose. May made chocolate cake from a recipe Elise had written on an index card when she was 23. There were 31 candles. All of them. Ben said it looked like a controlled burn. May cried before we even sang. I did not mind. After dinner, May brought out a box. Inside were the letters she had sent to Karen and Charles over the years. Copies of some, drafts of others. Birthday cards returned unopened. Christmas photos she had never been allowed to send. A tiny sweater Elise had bought me before the accident. I touched it with 2 fingers. It was yellow. Why did you keep all this? I asked. May looked at me as if the answer were obvious. Because lost is not the same as gone. I think that is the sentence I live by now. Lost is not the same as gone. I was lost to them for almost 3 decades. But I had not been gone. Elise had not been gone. Aunt Lillian had not been gone. Even the parts of me I thought Karen had made practical beyond repair had not been gone. They were waiting somewhere quiet, like documents in an old file, needing only the right person to open the drawer. I still work in trust compliance. I still love records. But now when I help someone find an old deed or account statement or guardianship letter, I understand that a document is sometimes more than proof. Sometimes it is a door. Sometimes it is a hand reaching across years. Sometimes it is a dead woman making sure her daughter can stand up at a table and leave with her name intact. Here is what I learned from 30 years. One envelope and a family seated 3 tables behind a lie. People who call you ungrateful are often counting what they spent, not what they withheld. People who say they gave you a roof may be hoping you never ask who paid for the foundation. People who hide your past are not protecting you from pain. They are protecting themselves from accountability. And family is not the person who keeps you because a check arrives. Family is the person who keeps a chair empty because hope has nowhere else to sit. Karen once told me I had been an arrangement. Maybe I was a guardianship file, a settlement trust, a line in a distribution schedule, a child attached to monthly payments. But Elise ran into fire for that child. May wrote letters for that child. Clara kept photographs. Ben saved jokes he hoped were not too much. Aunt Lillian told the truth when lying would have been cheaper. And me? I grew up. I found the file. I opened the folder. And when the people who raised me told me I was no longer useful, I finally understood something that would have saved me years if I had known it sooner. Being useful was never the same as being loved. That is my story. One birthday dinner, one unsigned release, one trust they could not touch, and one empty chair that had been waiting for me longer than I had been waiting for permission to sit down.